So as of editing this, like finishing up the editing, Into the Pit comes out tomorrow. So if Into the Pit ends up like confirming Stitchline games, then this is more of a time capsule if you're watching afterwards. If Into the Pit doesn't outright confirm Stitchline games, this is still holding as a theory. I just really need to get this video out. This isn't even for anything. This is just for me. I have sunk so much time into this. And sure, it would be a cool little time capsule to everything before Cassidy being the one you should not have killed got instantly annihilated. Yeah. So I'm locking in my answer. I think Cassidy's the one you should not have killed. Scott sent the game to the YouTubers. They're gonna stream it and they're not gonna record it. I gotta... Oh no, I am currently about to render this video. Gosh darn it, Scott. Oh my gosh. Also, I know I butt in a lot in this video, but I'm just having fun with this video. I don't want to sound like a cynic who is like, everybody is incorrect except for me, because I don't actually possess an undying hatred for Stitchline game believers. Okay, don't worry. If I get mad, it's for a bit. Hey, okay, so before I start, I do want to make one thing clear. This was mostly written before the Scott interview, and even though that doesn't say anything concrete, he does mention stuff about the books, and I have seen a lot of people like discussing it. I do not take that into account for most of this video, but it's not really much of importance with the claims that I'm making. But I'm gonna make it clear that I have most of the script was made without that in mind, and honestly it's just another drop in the ocean of whatever the book debate is. But yeah, here's the video. I've run out of ideas for how to say I've run out of ideas for how to make a cool opener, so I'll just jump in. The one you shouldn't have killed. Who are they? I'm not speaking until I have an attorney present. This little goober refuses to make any sort of sense ever. Maybe. When Ultimate Custom Night, the game where this character is the main mystery, you know, the mysterious victim of Afton that comes back to haunt him years later and torture him because they're really mad. When UCN came out, one of the most common theories was that the one you shouldn't have killed? Cassidy. They had the connection to Golden Freddy because, let's be real, who else would they possess? And they were just conveniently introduced as probably important, so made sense. Okay, so in recent times, meaning for like a while, this theory has come under question, many times being labeled as downright impossible or debunked. No, I get the argument for the alternative theories, but Cassidy being the one you should not have killed is far from being debunked, because I didn't hear a dang bell. I haven't heard a bell yet. After really looking into this debate and mystery as a whole, I repeatedly came to the conclusion that Cassidy was a very likely candidate for being the one you should not have killed, and that still stands. Now, I'm not saying it's definitely correct, but I think it's fully possible, if not likely, given the information that we have. First off, let's go through the arguments against Cassidy being the one you should not have killed. First off, the gender debate, whoop-de-doo. One of the biggest problems with Cassidy fitting into this role is that the one you should not have killed is specifically referred to as a he, while Cassidy is both a girl in the novel trilogy and likely the happiest day girl in the logbook. But there's a bit more nuance to this. There are many ways that people have found to get around this, but many of them can fall into ad hoc or confirmation bias territory pretty quickly. The most common argument I see as to why they would be saying he under Cassidy, I can't say the one you should not have killed every time. Let's say vengeful Cassidy. The most common argument I see as to why they would be saying he under vengeful Cassidy is that these lines are referring to Golden Freddy, the animatronic they possess, and not the spirit of Cassidy. I always found this kind of dumb. Like, these lines are so clearly meant to be referring to a person or ghost, it would make no sense to use the pronouns of the animatronic. However, this isn't necessarily unprecedented. In the FNAF 2 minigame Take Cake to the Children, there's a robotic voice in the background repeating S-A-V-E-H-I-M, but this is clearly depicting the death of Charlotte. Many people argue that this is the one retcon of the series that Scott mentioned in a Steam post. However, this post was made before FNAF 6, the game that confirmed that this kid was Charlie, and Scott also said it was pretty seamless. This is not seamless. I'm not saying it can't be a retcon, but there's no information to suggest that it definitely is. So if it's not a retcon, why is it saying him? Charlotte goes by she/her pronouns in her entire existence in the books and merch. Well, there is another character here, the puppet. Charlie is the spirit possessing the puppet, we all know this, but the puppet is referred to as a he. Her identity might just be as the puppet and no longer as Charlotte. She could have become the character after living as it for so long. Or the minigame just decided to address her as the animatronic. So, Save Him might be about the puppet, which makes a lot of sense, because Charlotte is dead. She dies pretty quickly. This could be talking to whoever is in the cake bear suit, like Henry probably, but it could also be talking to the player, saving Charlotte as the puppet. We couldn't save her then, but we can save her now. For you and for those you have carried into your arms, this ends for all of us. End communication. So the whole him use for the puppet and Charlotte could be applied to Golden Freddy and Cassidy. Another thing is that Cassidy could just be a boy or intentionally ambiguous. We don't have any confirmed mentions of them in the game timeline, except if you believe that the Logbook girl is Cassidy. Now this image is weird. It would be really blunt if this was just straight up a drawing of Happiest Day, but I see why people think it's Cassidy. Aside from some minor differences, it does seem to be them, but like, I don't care. Cass neither, aka correct. Okay, well, I don't know on this one, but I think there is some evidence to suggest that Cassidy just doesn't have a specific gender. Why? Undertale. Hear me out on this. Undertale was created by Toby Fox and Temmie Chang in the year of our Lord 2015. It was a huge success, spawning a whole lot of fan art, fan games, fan theories, fan songs, and fans. One of the most captivating parts was its unique meta-narrative, a narrative that acknowledges or draws attention to the fact that it is artificial in of itself, but it also merged with the regular narrative. Mechanics like saving and loading were completely diegetic in the storyline, but also kind of meta. It's weird. One of the best ways this game breaks the fourth wall, while still having a narrative in place, is the true pacifist ending. If you defeat Asriel, get the credits, and then boot up the game again, you are greeted by Flowey, telling you to let Frisk and the others live their life, to move on from the game, and to go touch grass. Go on to bigger and better things. Everyone's gotten their happy ending. Sound familiar? Keep a pin in that familiarity, and move on to another RPG, FNAF World. FNAF World is a very personal game for Scott. It's partially him venting out his frustration about being an indie horror developer with demanding fans. He even puts himself in the game multiple times, straight up talking to the player about how normal mode wasn't enough for them, and that they always want more. In the wise words of the oof troop,
what is Scott Cawthon Ventart if not Henry lore?
In reference to Desk Guy. And of course, there's Old Man Consequences, also serving as a link between FNAF World and UCN. And if we look at all of this in a kind of bundled little gift thing, it kind of becomes clear that this game is, once again, about Scott's frustrations with being an indie horror developer, and people just demanding more and more and more from all of his games, wanting more and more and more out of the franchise. If we look at UCN through this lens, it might serve a similar purpose. The vengeful spirit is the player, never letting these characters die and never resting, demanding more and more out of them. Old Man Consequences in UCN tells the player to leave William alone and rest their own soul. It's incredibly similar to the post-credit scene, for lack of a better term, in Undertale. Along with that, there's the menu theme, isoptrophobia, the fear of mirrors or your own reflection. Now this very well could be and probably is about William facing his own sins and what he's become, but it could also be about the vengeful spirit and what it represents. It plays specifically on the menu screen, where you control the knight, something William definitely wouldn't be able to see. He's not in control whatsoever. The vengeful spirit is. So with that all said, why would this matter? When you make a character that is supposed to reflect the player as well as possible, what's something you can do? You either 1, make them customizable, or just a player character, or 2, make them ambiguous. The one you should not have killed's gender might be intentionally confusing, because there's not meant to be a gender. That was a really long way of saying Scott might be screwing with us. It's not the first time he's done that, though admittedly, that was with an animatronic, not, you know, a really important character. Though Mangle is important in my heart. Another big argument against Vengeful Cassidy is the fact that many people believe Cassidy is the receiver of Happiest Day. And yeah, I do too, even if I don't like it. First off, Happiest Day could just be after UCN. There is some genuine evidence to suggest that, or Cassidy just decided not to move on, like the puppet did. And even though Golden Freddy's mask doesn't fall slowly like the puppet, Scott can turn whatever into whatever. I doubt he knew what that was gonna fully mean. He was just like, oh, I want to use the puppet more. And then people voted for UCN like a few years down the line, and he was like, oh shoot. Oh, I need to bring Golden Freddy back. Who knows? And with Happiest Day being after UCN, this is a genuine theory, there's a high possibility that FNAF World takes place around the same time as UCN, and if so, FNAF World might be setting up for Happiest Day to finally get the souls to truly move on and move past their anger, especially with Cassidy. Or Happiest Day just didn't happen, but that's not very likely. And finally, another common debunk for Vengeful Cassidy is the inconsistencies in their personality. Cassidy in the logbook shows no signs of aggression or hatred towards anyone, being relatively benevolent and helping CC remember who he is. And with the leading soul in Follow Me likely being Cassidy, them killing William doesn't make sense. Why not torture him then? It does make sense, actually. Well, for Follow Me, it can be very easily explained. Cassidy has been stuffed in a suit before, along with the other kids. They probably knew that William would be stuck in there, wanting William to experience the same pain they did, and even more under Cassidy's Springlock, which I'll talk about later. Or just generally wanting William to experience death. It fits with the Vengeful Spirit's lines about how this is how it feels. They want Afton to suffer what they suffered, but tenfold. And for the logbook, well, I mean, we don't really see much of Fated text in the first place, and just because they are antagonistic towards Afton doesn't mean they will be that way to everyone else. While Cassidy has a lot of agony, there's also remnant and happy memories there. Cassidy is still a kid, and a person. So that's most of the annoying details out of the way. However, just because a theory works, doesn't mean it's right. You can conjure up anything to work in this franchise, but if it doesn't have much solid evidence pushing for its existence, it's likely not true. However, I think Vengeful Cassidy has a lot of strong evidence going for it. First off, Cassidy is almost definitely Golden Freddy. There's really no other spot for them. And UCN has some randomly Golden Freddy focused secrets. The Fredbear jump scare, plus Golden Freddy technically being unkillable even with a death coin, and the Void cutscene that you can only get after beating 4920, which is the second hardest out of 20 challenge in the game. I've only seen 3 relatively believable explanations for this cutscene. 1, it's showing how the Vengeful Spirit possesses Golden Freddy. 2, it's showing Afton's first or worst mistake, which works really well under Vengeful Sammy if you believe the Blackbird connections. Or 3, it's a red herring. Now, of course, I think it's the first. This is specifically unwithered Golden Freddy, not having the purple bow tie and hat. So it's definitely not about the bite. And I don't really buy the crying child being the 5th MCI kid much. Oh, okay. Update. There's no way. Update. VIP release. And there, oh no. It might, I'm not gonna think about that too much. If the crying child ends up being the 5th MCI, so be it. I'm already kind of grasping with the fact that Into the Pit could also change a lot of this theory. I don't care anymore. I just need to get this video out. If you want to look into BV 5th on your own, then go ahead. But I'm just gonna not worry about that right now. This is after writing. Oh my gosh. And this could be a red herring. Golden Freddy is the mystery character, but it would be kind of out of nowhere. Scott doesn't usually do red herrings. At least I think. So that leaves it being representative of the one you should not have killed. And Cassidy getting spring-locked. Woo. Okay, so a quick trigger warning. I do get into spring-locking, which is like the most gruesome part of this entire series. So if you don't want to hear about like a lot of blood, you can skip ahead. So I personally believe that this cutscene represents Cassidy getting spring-locked by Afton. Why? Well, first, let's look at Golden Freddy in this cutscene. He's twitching constantly throughout it. This is actually one of the first times we see Golden Freddy even move outside of the Fredbear jump scare or his 8-bit appearances. He's almost completely stationary every other time. Even at FNAF World, he's just kind of there. This is pretty out of character. And this is specifically the unwithered Golden Freddy model, like I said, meaning this is either after or before FNAF 2, not during. And back to the twitching aspects, one of the things involved in getting Springlocked is twitching. In Follow Me and the movie, Afton twitches a whole bunch while getting Springlocked. And there also is the FNAF 3 trailer, but that's when he's already Springtrapped, so I don't think that's meant to be of the events, but I mean, Spring Bonnie could have been withered by the time of Follow Me. They were just rotting in a back room. Who knows? I digress. Considering all of that, this very well could be Cassidy showing Afton what he did to them. Need more proof? Well, in the Old Man Consequences Easter egg, OMC can be seen fishing at a red lake. And if you manage to clip in and likely implied to be drowning in the lake, if you manage to clip in and imply to drown in the, and if you manage to clip in and imply drown in the lake, the game crashes. And if you manage to clip in and likely imply to be drown in the lake, how do you say that? How do you, and if you manage to clip in and implied drown, and if you manage to clip in, which is implied to be drowning in the lake, the game crashes. I did it. I'm so good at English. I'm so good at words. But this isn't the only time a red lake is present in the series. It has been repeated throughout several games. While this led some people to believe that the red lake was representative of the one you should not have killed drowning, I think it's almost definitely about the one you should not have killed being springlocked. Maybe. So, and here's where the trigger warning comes in. One of the few descriptions we get of how it's like to be springlocked is from William in the novels, where he describes part of it as drowning in your own blood. Jesus Christ, dude. So, drowning in a red lake lines up kinda well with being springlocked. And like I said, when you drown in a lake, the game crashes. You leave Old Man Consequences, you boot up the game again, you continue the cycle after remembering and reliving what William did and returning to the endless revenge. This is Cassidy remembering what William did to them and getting angry once again. And also, under Vengeful Cassidy, why wouldn't they be springlocked? It gives more of a reason for them to be vengeful, and it doesn't mess with anything in the story, like, at all. But even if you don't believe Cassidy springlock, what could this cutscene possibly be saying other than the vengeful spirit possesses Golden Freddy? The only other semi-valid explanation I see for this is meant to remind Afton of his biggest or first mistake, which fits with Vengeful Sammy plus Blackbird connection thing, which is a goated theory, to be honest. I really recommend, I'm gonna butcher this name, Perside Labs video on Sammy, and even though Didophobia ruined the FNAF 4 connection, it's still pretty cool. I don't like Didophobia or the illusion disc. I don't like this being an experiment anyway, but I find the former much more likely. Okay, so let's actually get into the meat of this video. So you know the Stitch race? Of course you do. The agony-filled endoskeleton that has caused so much debate and fighting in this community. Well, I don't think he's canon in the slightest. Don't click off yet. Here's why. Stitchline Games has a lot of weird story elements that sort of conflict with the in-game timeline, with Pizza Sim apparently being ancient history during Stitchline, the absurdity of Jeff's Pizzas, Funtime Freddy being in a dude's garage, and Eleanor. Nothing specific about her, I just find it hard to believe she's in the main timeline. There's also the fact that The Man in Room 1280 came out 2 years after Ultimate Custom Night. The story that, according to Stitchline Games, supposedly gave us the answer to who the one you should not have killed is, came out 2 whole years after Ultimate Custom Night. Scott supposedly left us in the dark with an unsolvable mystery for 2 years. And this isn't like FNAF 4 introducing the whole Afton family and the crying child afterwards, because FNAF 3 had its own story without them. Now you just have to factor them in and recontextualize some elements. I do reference, this is one time I'm gonna reference Scott interview. He does say with a lot of story elements, he just kind of throws like a rope out there and trusts that eventually there's gonna be an end to that rope, and that's gonna be the solution to the mystery. That's kind of what FNAF 3 did, and setting up for the crying child Cassie. Blah, 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 blah. Whatever. This is not throwing a rope out in hopes it gets solved. This is throwing a specifically unsolvable mystery and implying that this is going to be a mystery that we have to figure out. And then 2 years later, it's like, oh, by the way, you were all wrong. It's this kid. He's new now. Be nice to him. Huh? I just... I don't hate Andrew as a character. I find the entire Stitchline quite interesting, but it's just a huge middle finger to have him just jump in and be important. Like, no. So that's why I don't think Stitchline is canon. Oh yeah, the mimic. Okay, this is like an unscripted part of the video. I haven't written this for the script. The mimic is an entirely different situation. First off, nobody liked Burn Trap. Nobody liked Burn Trap. People did like Cassidy. So that's a difference. The reason, a lot of people think the reason they came out with the mimic were like, oh, people don't want Afton to be back? Oh no, let's write a book about this. And it seems like with the Scott interview, he might have intended Afton to never be the one coming back, which is interesting and also adds another thing, because I don't think, because Scott just worked on UCN. It was just him. The security breach thing that he mentions is that he was working with developers and he didn't even tell them the dang story. UCN was just him. He knew the story, so he doesn't have to go back and elaborate like, oh wait, no, this actually wasn't them. It was this person. He doesn't have to do that with Ultimate Custom Night. The reason the mimic happened is likely because Scott wanted to elaborate on, hey, Afton isn't actually back, or whatever going on in there. This is a Tales game. Oh, I hate Tales games, but it's like, it might be right. And then that makes the biggest argument I see for Stitchline games is that, well, Tales games likely, and there's the Eleanor pendant or whatever, the whatever in the MacGuffin that is. So, you know, why not use it? So they're connected and both canon. Sure. So then what is the point of Stitchline, you say? Parallels. Don't click off yet. I believe the Stitch Wraith is a very clear parallel to the story of Golden Freddy. Don't click off yet, please. And it's Scott telling us how this happened. First, let's talk about Jake. Jake is a character from the real Jake. He is a kid with a brain tumor who, during his time being bedridden, is spoken to from his father using a doll named Simon. Blah, blah. Both him and his father eventually pass away, and Jake ends up possessing the Simon doll, which becomes the face of the Stitch Wraith. Sounds familiar? A kid with a head-related problem who is comforted by a toy they have, possibly by their parental figure. That's the crying child. That's the gosh darn crying child. And with the other information, it might imply that the crying child possesses the Fredbear plush and then Golden Freddy, but I'll get into that later. And no, just because Jake and the crying child have different personalities doesn't make it not a parallel. They still parallel each other in their story elements. Not everything is going to be handed on a silver platter. It's not going to be like, oh yeah, Jake, he cried a lot, and then his brother wore a Monty mask to scare him, and then they took Jake and then they put him in an aquarium and a shark bit his head off, and they went into a coma and his dad talked to him through the Glamrock Freddy plush and said, I will put the pieces together. No, but that is far from it all. Andrew is a kid who is very vengeful towards Afton, and the second kid in the Stitch Wraith, creating the UCN of Fazbear Frights. I hate this kid. Yeah, so this is the alternative Cassidy, whatever. He also doesn't even remember what Afton did, lacking memories along with the ability to see within the Stitch Wraith. Sound familiar again? It's the gosh darn crying child again! He can't remember much, he can't see, and the vengeful part is probably about Cassidy because we haven't mentioned Cassidy yet, but there's two kids here, and it's a kid who's evil, but they're not evil actually, I lied. There's a kid who's vengeful and died in a very bad way, so they're very mad at Afton. And then there's another kid who can't see within the two-sphered animatronic with the other kid, who also can't remember basically anything, who also died to a head-related injury and possesses their plush. This is just GoldenDuo. I can't take it anymore. This is just the story of GoldenDuo, but minorly scrambled. The crying child dies in the bite. William talks to him through his Fredbear plush. Crying child possesses the Fredbear plush. Cassidy is brutally killed by William and possesses Golden Freddy. Somehow, like Luther William playing around with ghost science, the CC inside the Fredbear plush is transferred to or combines with Golden Freddy, possessing it alongside Cassidy. Then they both rot in some room, I don't know, while Cassidy tries to get CC to remember, likely a Shatter Victim moment. And if you believe Alter S, Afton using Golden Freddy for parts and CC and Cassidy end up latching onto him, similar to the Stitch Wraith, but like little spinny way around. Not everything's gonna be on a silver platter. And then Pizza Sim happens, and then Cassidy keeps William alive in Ultimate Custom Night. It fits way too perfectly. These are all theories that have been established within the community that people saw as real possibilities. Plush Victim, which works. Like, it actually works within everything we know. I know it sounds stupid. And I thought it was stupid too. And then I read The Real Jake, and I was like, wait a minute. Something's up here. And then there's GoldenDuo, which I talked about. There's Logbook Duo. There's Cassidy being the one you should not have killed. There's Golden Victim. It all makes up the story elements of the Stitchline, but with new characters and a different timeline. I feel like I'm insane because I see so many people who just don't believe this, but it feels so clear to me. I have to be missing something. Am I insane? Are you insane? Is all fair in love and war? And it doesn't end there. Remember Gregbot? Don't click off yet. I'm not talking about, that's an insane rambling for another day. But one of the biggest fuels for this theory was the connections between Gregory and the crying child. The striped shirt, brown hair, kidness, etc. But in the DLC for Security Breach, we got another character. Cassie? Sound familiar? I remember how confused people were watching the Ruin trailer when they dropped the name Cassie. It was an interesting time. But let's think about this. Two characters who are closely related, one being more aggressive and vengeful, while the other is much more emotional and sentimental, having love for certain characters in the Freddy's franchise, both bearing similarities to CC and Cassidy. This very well could be a thematic parallel that is there for literally no other reason, just to be cool, but it could also be another Stitch Wraith situation, being GoldenDuo, but minorly scrambled up. And having very similar personalities this time, rehammering in the fact that CC and Cassidy have a connection, and it's likely within Golden Freddy. So many Golden Freddy related theories that were originally mere possibilities with some evidence, like they worked, that also sounds stupid, but they work, are now insanely reinforced by the fact that that happens in a story. That's a thing that can happen. And you might be thinking, why am I talking so much about GoldenDuo? This is about the one you should not have killed. But if the Stitch Wraith is to be believed as a parallel to Golden Freddy, Cassidy has to be the vengeful spirit. Or CC, but like, that's highly unlikely. And in any other theory other than Golden Andrew and Sammy Mike Toynes, this Golden Freddy cutscene rules out anyone but Cassidy and CC. And once again, CC is unlikely. Cassidy is inside Golden Freddy. Andrew is the novel version of Cassidy. Cassidy shares Golden Freddy with CC. Cassidy is the vengeful spirit. There are too many connections they have to Golden Freddy for this to not be the case in my eyes. It's one step between the two characters. It is a not even missing link. Though I should bring up one of the biggest problems that does mess this up a bit, specifically in my argument of, if GoldenDuo is a thing, then Cassidy is definitely the vengeful spirit. The Logbook. Throughout the book, Faded Text and Altered Text speak, likely Cassidy and CC. Cassidy asks questions like, was your childhood toy a purple telephone, or does he still talk to you? On the page with Psychic Friend Fredbear, blah blah blah. And CC sometimes responds in simple answers like, I can hear sounds, or I can't see. Or the party was for me. But this logbook is owned by Mike, and likely at Fazbear's Fright, considering the office we see in the Foxy thing. By then, Cassidy and CC should have been in contact for a while, if William was the one to put CC in Fredbear. So why would they still be asking for each other's name? This is where things get a bit wonky, because once again, there's no clean explanation for this. Either 1, CC ends up in Fredbear by Michael's doing, 2, CC and Cassidy just didn't or weren't able to talk to each other beforehand, or 3, they just decided to ask that stuff now, or the logbook is getting imprints of their past conversations. But once again, there is a weird way for it to work. And it sucks. but there's a significant amount of evidence to still support this theory, and I don't see any more convincing alternatives. However, when it comes to GoldenDuo, I do see some convincing alternatives. So the three main ones that I feel like a lot of people say, oh no, it's got GoldenDuo, it's this, it's GoldenUno, free victim, or follow victim. So GoldenUno is just a theory that it's just Cassidy and Golden Freddy, and that CC is likely either free victim, completely shattered victim, follow victim, whatever. Now, free victim is the theory that CC is just not in anything, and it works. It's hard to get into, but he's kind of wandering around, and alone together seems to suggest a sort of wandering soul. And with the unmarked grave, this could be the crying child. And that is a more recent story in Tales rather than what we got in the Stitchline. So newer stuff is to be prioritized, but it's not new by that much. And then follow victim is a theory that I really like, is that CC possesses Michael, or his soul latches onto Michael after sister location. Explains why when Michael gets the FNAF 3 and Cassidy is just somehow there, they are able to communicate now and not before. So I will give it some merit. I do think follow victim, free victim, maybe even hell, maybe even just plush victim, and Michael takes the plush to FNAF 3 have merit. But I cannot shake off how GoldenDuo pilled the Stitch Wraith is. So after all that, what do I think? I think Cassidy being the one you should not have killed is a very viable theory. Once again, I've seen a lot of people say that it's debunked, it's impossible, it's just fan and BS, but it's really not. There's so much going for it that I see why people believe it. And I understand why people don't believe it. There are genuine problems that feel weird even with the explanations. But I hope through this video that I can at least give it some ground to stand on before Into the Pit might just dismantle all of that. Why am I making this video at this time? I should have made this earlier. I started this in June, but all I'm saying is that there are a lot of theories that people have just ruled out or considered debunked. Like, I understand disagreeing with the theory, but completely ruling it out of any sort of consideration is just eh. Like, there are some theories I totally understand ruling out, like mic trip, because, you know, that's been debunked. But ruling out theories like Cassidy being the one you should not have killed is dumb because there is actually a lot of evidence. You can rule out theories that have little evidence and have been relatively debunked, but that's just not the case for Cassidy being the one you should not have killed, and a lot of other theories, in my opinion. And, like, theorizing is meant to be fun. There's so many possibilities and so many different ways we can go with it that I would be happy with any answer, except for Stitchline games. Not that I dislike Stitchline, I just find it dumb from a writing perspective. But I mean, I like Andrew, I'll live with it. He's neat. The Stitch Wraith actually looks really cool, I will say. But one thing that and there's also just a general thing about Cassidy being sort of disregarded in a lot of theories. I haven't seen it as much recently, but Sire Squawks has a really good video on Cassidy fandom erasure, and it's a genuine thing that Cassidy definitely has a place and an important place in the story. Like, in the dual process theory timeline, they put Cassidy as the crying child. That fits with their importance. This is a character that we had to solve a puzzle for and had a whole script named after them. They were at least present to see most of the lore, and were also that big of a mystery and important enough. There's also, and in CassidyUno, that still works. Even so, if Cassidy isn't the one you should not have killed, there are other theories. Cassidy could be a puppet clone, or a puppet clone specifically for the crying child.